We've heard it multiple times this season. The 2023 Mercedes has been a terrible car. How a car that challenged for second in the Constructors' Championship can be terrible, we don't know. I guess when you've won as much as Mercedes have in recent years, you start to feel entitled to race wins. That winning mentality hasn't been bruised by one season not at the front of the grid though, and Mercedes are already warning the rest of the paddock that they're planning to dominate 2023. How are Mercedes going to improve on this season? And can they really return to their dominant best? Let's find out. Lewis Hamilton says he's looking forward to not having to drive the troubled Mercedes W13 again. The W13 has been problematic since its first proper test in Barcelona, and the team has spent the season fighting porpoising and ride issues. While the car has been competitive since Azerbaijan, and George Russell led Hamilton in a 1-2 in Brazil, it still has issues, which resurfaced in Abu Dhabi this weekend. Hamilton and Russell qualified 5th and 6th for the final race of the season, behind the Red Bulls and Ferraris. "I definitely wasn't expecting to see such a big gap," Hamilton replied when asked about his qualifying session. "But we're losing 6/10 on the straight, so kind of reminiscent of some of the previous races before kind of Austin and bouncing his back. So that's not been easy." Asked what the team needs to address with next year's car, he made it clear that there is more than one weakness with the W13. "Brakes, bouncing is probably number 1, drag is probably number 2, he said, or equal number 1. There's loads of other things. We've obviously got some downforce, we just need to build a much more efficient car. And I think everybody in the team knows exactly what the problems are, and where they are, and where we've gone wrong, and I'm pretty confident that they're not going to build the next car with any of these characteristics." Hamilton has summed up the W13 rather nicely in this interview. The W13's bouncing was the obvious issue at the start of the year and was an easy guinea pig for the car's problems, but as the bouncing started to be resolved, much larger problems appeared. The brakes, specifically the cooling, which has a huge effect on tyre warm-up and wear, obviously weren't working as intended, as Mercedes consistently failed to get their tyres working. The drag was the other issue. At slower tracks and higher altitude tracks, the W13 has been competitive with anyone on the grid, even Red Bull, but everywhere else, it basically has a parachute attached to the back of it, sapping any kind of speed the engine might be able to produce. So, what are Mercedes planning on doing about it? Can they actually compete for a Constructors' or Drivers' title in 2023? Well, before we answer those questions, let me tell you about Established Titles, an incredible company that's preserving the natural woodlands of Scotland and helping with global reforestation. This amazing last-minute gift makes you the owner of 1 square foot of land in Edelston, Scotland, and Established Titles plants a tree with the global charities, 1 tree planted and trees for the future. That's great, but this gift offers even more. There is an old Scottish tradition of calling landowners lairds, which is lord or lady to those of you who don't live in 15th century Scotland. By gifting someone land in Scotland, you give them the right to call themselves a lord or lady, and they get a certificate to prove it. You can add lord or lady to your credit card, plane tickets, or even your FIA super license. You do have one, don't you? The first 200 people who purchase a title pack using our link will get their plot pretty much directly next to mine. This isn't just an amazing last-minute gift. We could also start our own little Scottish kingdom. Established Titles is actually running a massive Black Friday sale right now. Plus, if you use the code F1Reverse, you get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/F1Reverse to get your gifts now and help support the channel. If you bought an Established Titles product with our code, let us know in the comments below so we can shout you out by your proper title. Coming into the 2022 season, Mercedes had been utterly dominant for 8 years, bar the Drivers' Championship in 2021. Their dominance at the start of the turbo hybrid era in 2014 was thanks to an incredible engine, and from there they outdeveloped their opponents to stay ahead, though Ferrari did challenge them at times. Mercedes never really had to play catch-up in any of those 8 seasons. They knew what they had a winning formula, and they just built on those. 2023 is going to be a very different prospect. They don't really know what they have, as shown by how surprised they were by the lack of performance in Abu Dhabi in this season's finale. They don't have a winning formula either. In previous years, they've been able to play for track position and rely on their faster car to compensate for any suboptimal pit stop strategies. They've tried the same thing this season, in Mexico and Austin, and found that it doesn't work when your opponents are competitive. So how are Mercedes going to address these problems? First off, let's ask, what are they going to do to make the W14 better than the W13? Some people might ask, how are they going to fix the W13? But from what the team have been saying, the W13 might be unfixable in their eyes. I think the DNA of the car is going to change for next year. That's clear, Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff said. It doesn't necessarily mean that the bodywork is going to look very different, but certainly what is part of our DNA of the car will change for next year. Toto's mention of bodywork is clearly a nod towards the side pods, which gained a lot of attention early in the season, and in the eyes of some of the media, were to blame for their problems. The side pods aren't to blame, and they definitely don't define the DNA of the car, so we may see the no-pod side pod return in 2023. What DNA means is something deeper within the car. DNA will cover the underlying architecture of the car, its suspension and underfloor. Mercedes' fundamental problem in 2022 has been its rear suspension setup, which prevents the team from being able to run the W13 at the optimal ride height, without the bouncing problems that rattled its drivers to the point of back and chest pains earlier in the season. The team campaigned for changes throughout the season to try and address this problem. They succeeded in getting changes made to the scrutineering of the cars. Lewis and George's complaints about bouncing meant the FIA would crack down on any car bouncing excessively. In terms of actual technical changes, the 15mm raise to the edge of the floor height is significant and will have a knock-on effect on the entire rear end aero. It will alter how air travels over the beam wing, rear wing and rear tyres. In Mercedes' particular case, it will make it even harder for them to run at their preferred ride height, if not impossible. So for 2023, they're going to have to rethink their entire chassis and suspension setup. Mercedes has chosen its path for 2023 with the hope it can return to F1's title fight and get on par with Red Bull and Ferrari, which both usurped it this year. I think we have found a path we believe in, and a path we can move along and get better, Technical Director Mike Elliott said. F1 is a learning game. You never know all the answers, and what we've been trying to do is to make sure there's nothing we're missing. Keep digging. See if it's something else we need to find. You've got to look and say we've got two fantastic competitors, a lot of good competitors, but two very strong ones in Ferrari and Red Bull. We need to go into the winter and do a good job, and that's the only way we'll get on par with them, and hopefully beat them. Next year's car will look different. I'm not going to say why, but it will look different. Whatever the team has in plan for next year, it appears to be filling Lewis Hamilton with confidence. 2022 was the 7-time world champion's worst ever season. His first ever season without a win or a pole position, and his lowest ever finish in the Drivers' Championship. Taking to social media after Tuesday's post-session test in Abu Dhabi, Hamilton said the 2022 season was one to forget. "I'm pretty sure I speak for all of us when I say I'm glad the season has come to an end," Hamilton wrote on Instagram. "Won't miss it. I have no doubt we'll come back better. We'll be back, I'll be back." For Hamilton, an 8th driver's crown is the ultimate target, and Jacques Villeneuve is seeing signs that a renewed bid for the 37-year-old Briton is on the cards. "Next year, I expect a lot from Hamilton. We're going to see the best Lewis," said the Canadian after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. He ended the season without a pole position and a victory. That will do something to him, I think. And then it will be fun. There will always be optimism surrounding Mercedes due to what they have achieved in recent history. Red Bull's reduced aero testing time will be a huge bonus as well, as will Mercedes' increased aero testing time. But it is Ferrari that may pose a bigger threat. If the Scuderia can resolve their engine reliability issues, something they are still allowed to do even after the engine homologation, then Ferrari will be fast in 2023. All Mercedes can do now is look at themselves and say, what can we do better? A more competitive car would be a great start. Less reliance on track position for race strategy would be another big step. Can they do it though? Why don't you let us know what you think in the comments down below? And until next time, drive safe and bye for now.